You don't realize how much he has held on to from that last conversation. He doesn't just remember, he relives it. Word for word, pause for pause. It's not memory, it's an internal replay, as if every syllable left a mark that is now impossible to erase. The scene doesn't come back as a whole. It returns in fragments. First, the way you breathed before answering. Then how you looked away, as if searching for a response in the air. And finally, that detail you might not have even noticed, the subtle change in tone that broke the usual rhythm of your voice. He isn't merely recalling, he's analyzing. He takes a simple phrase and turns it over from every angle. He thinks, did he really mean exactly that? Or was there something hidden there? And in that search, he finds no rest. Each mental rereading generates more questions than answers. Do you know what it's like when a memory becomes a labyrinth? He's trapped right there. Each corridor is a what-if. Each closed door is a new theory. And even if he knows there may not be a hidden meaning, he can't stop. What makes everything more intense is the weight of his experience. Years of living, listening, noticing nuances that many would overlook. He's learned that words almost never say it all. And because of that, he can't treat them as mere sounds. For him, each conversation is a field of signals, and yours was an open map. The obsession didn't start the moment of goodbye. It grew in the silence that followed. In the instant he tried to move on with his day, but realized he was mentally returning to that dialogue. He thought it would be temporary, but with each attempt to distract himself, the conversation re-emerged. More alive, more vivid, more uncomfortable. Maybe you think it's an exaggeration. Maybe you don't even remember everything you said. But for him, that conversation isn't just a memory, it's a key. A key isn't forgotten when you feel you still haven't found the right door. Have you gone through this? Have you ever felt stuck in a scene that no one else seemed to value? If so, leave a comment. I needed to hear this. He tries to find logical explanations. He thinks that perhaps it's not about you, but about something he's been carrying for years. An unfinished chapter in old situations, that old wound that always finds new ways to hurt. And upon hearing certain words, something inside him stirred. It wasn't just the content, it was the context, the tone, the energy in the air. And this realization isn't comfortable, because the more he ponders what you said, the more he discovers about himself, things he didn't want to revisit, memories he thought were buried, and suddenly your voice blends with voices from the past. The present mixes with yesterday, and he doesn't know how to separate them. That's why he repeats, that's why he revisits. It's not because he wants to. It's because something within him understands that until he decodes it, he can't let go. And until then, every detail of that conversation will remain alive, intact, waiting to be finally understood. In the midst of this dive, he starts to notice patterns, small gestures you might have repeated without noticing, the way you moved your hands while speaking, the brief silence before answering more direct questions. These details become codes, and he, with all the baggage of someone who has lived too much to ignore signs, interprets each one. But interpreting also means getting lost, because the more he finds meanings, the more he discovers that they are not absolute. Every possible interpretation opens up space for another, equally plausible one, and so the conversation never really ends. It multiplies within him, like an echo that replicates in various directions. The curious thing is that he's not just trying to understand you, he's trying to understand himself through what you said. It's as if his words were a mirror, and he's trapped, observing a reflection that changes every time he looks. Sometimes the reflection seems clear, other times it appears distorted, as if memory itself is playing tricks on him. And it's at this point that age weighs heavy, not in a physical sense but in the accumulation of experiences. Because someone younger might forget in just a few days, but he carries the habit of examining everything before letting it go. He learned early that letting something pass without deciphering it can be costly, and that lesson has shaped the way he lives to this day. What's most unsettling is that he can't decide if the conversation brought light or shadow, if it was a warning or a gift, if what you said was casual or loaded with intention, and that's what keeps him trapped, not knowing, not being sure. The absence of closure is heavier than any harsh answer. Sometimes he finds himself constructing imaginary scenarios. What if I had responded differently? What if I had asked more? What if what he said was an indirect message? These thoughts don't arise merely from insecurity. They come from the need to rewrite the past, to ease the present. Have you ever wanted to go back to a moment just to say something you didn't? Just to hear the same response in a different way? If so, comment, "I felt that too." He knows he can't go back. And this, in a way, increases the value of the memory, because everything that is unique and unrepeatable becomes more intense. Every time he revisits the scene, it seems to gain new contours, like a painting revealing itself gradually, layer by layer. There are moments when he tries to convince himself that he's exaggerating, that there's nothing there to uncover. But it only takes a pause, a moment of silence, and the conversation returns on its own, without warning, without permission. It settles in, like an unexpected visitor who knows the way to the house and enters without knocking. And deep down, he already realizes that it isn't the conversation itself that holds him captive, it's what it awakens in him. It's the feeling that you've said more than you intended to say, that there was something beneath the words, something he felt but couldn't translate. And that mystery is more addictive than any ready answer. Maybe that's why he doesn't reach out to ask you directly. Because if he asks, he risks finding out that there was nothing at all. And in that case, he would also lose the spark that keeps him attentive, alive, on alert. So he prefers to live in that space, between what is certain and what is possible. A space that paradoxically hurts and comforts at the same time. He knows that one day this memory will fade away. But for now, it's almost like a companion, a fixed point amid the chaos, something he can return to whenever he wants to feel that mix of curiosity and restlessness again. And maybe that's exactly what keeps him from letting go. Little by little, he starts to realize that the conversation doesn't just live in his memory, it begins to reshape his routine. Certain places now have a different meaning. He avoids that corner where he spoke with you, as if the physical absence could erase the memory. But at the same time, he seeks out situations that bring the conversation back into focus, as if he wants to confirm that it was real, that he didn't make anything up. The ordinary day is no longer so ordinary. While having coffee, while walking, while pretending to pay attention to other subjects, there's always a snippet of that talk playing in the background, like a song he didn't choose to listen to, but that insists on playing. He starts to find your voice in completely unrelated situations, a phrase in a book, a tone of laughter on the street, a way of looking that reminds him of you. Each association is a bridge that takes him back, and he crosses these bridges without realizing it, until he does. The most intriguing part is that the mental repetition doesn't just bring back neutral memories, it also reconstructs emotions. When he recalls the moment he hesitated, he feels the same tension. When he remembers the moment he smiled faintly, he feels the same warmth. It's as if the memory is not merely a record, but a doorway that opens the present to welcome back old sensations. And with this, he begins to wonder if he truly understood what happened that day. Did you realize the effect it would have? Was it intentional? Or was it just the way he, with all his experiences, absorbed the moment? These questions do not fade away. On the contrary, they feed on the very passage of time. The life experience he carries is both a gift and a burden. A gift, because it gives him the ability to see what others cannot. A burden, because it prevents him from simply letting things go. He has gone through so many conversations that seem trivial, only to later reveal themselves as pivotal, that now he is suspicious of every detail, and, in his case, he is even more suspicious. There are days when he feels angry with himself for not being able to stop. Angry for giving so much space to something that you may no longer even remember. But soon this anger dissipates, because in some way he also enjoys this state. For him, obsession is a signal that something important happened, and if it happened, then it needs to be understood until the end. Have you ever felt that a memory chose you, rather than the other way around? That no matter how hard you try, it comes back to find you? If this has already happened, say, "I've lived this." He notices changes in his own body, a light tightness in his chest when he thinks of certain words you used, a chill in his stomach when he remembers how the conversation ended. Small physical reactions that confirm that this is not just a thought. It's something that crosses the skin, that alters the internal chemistry. And no matter how hard he tries to distract himself, everything seems to work against him. The news, casual dialogues, even the silence of the night. Everything seems to be in place to bring the conversation back, as if the entire universe were complicit in this repetition. The line between remembering and living it again begins to blur. He no longer knows if he's merely recalling the past or if somehow he's keeping the conversation alive in the present. This realization frightens him, but it also intrigues him, because as long as she exists, he doesn't have to face the emptiness that would come with letting her go. Perhaps deep down he doesn't want to forget. Maybe he wants this conversation to remain an open wound, not because he enjoys the pain, but because it proves that something real happened. And to him, real things are far too rare to be forgotten. Over time, he starts to realize that he's not just remembering you, he's reconstructing you. With each repetition, the details shift a little. The spark in your eyes becomes more intense. The tone of your voice carries more weight. The pauses stretch out as if they conceal more than they reveal. It's not a lie. It's not pure invention. It's as if memory, to survive, needs to reinvent itself. He doesn't realize that he's creating different versions of the same moment, versions that, to him, all seem equally true. In one, you seem distant, almost cold. In another, you convey care as if you're trying to say something without exposing yourself too much. He drifts between these possibilities, and each one opens up new interpretations. This multiplicity of images is not a flaw. It's part of the process. He knows from experience that the mind doesn't store facts. It stores perceptions. And perceptions change, even when we swear they won't. That's why he doesn't fully trust what he remembers, but he also can't doubt enough to abandon the search. The perception he has of you is no longer static. You become a mosaic of expressions, tones, glances, and silences, and each piece of that mosaic carries a meaning that he insists on deciphering. As if each gesture were a clue purposefully left behind, this leads him to investigate even what hasn't been said, the space between words, the moment you breathed before responding, the instant you looked away. For him, these little gaps hold more truth than any entire sentence. The curious thing is that in doing this, he starts to see things that might not even be there. But for him, that doesn't matter, because what counts is the feeling that lingers, not the concrete proof. He has lived long enough to know that not everything real can be proven, and in his case, this lack of proof is exactly what keeps the mystery alive. He also notices that he is paying more attention to you than to anyone else. When he thinks of other encounters, other dialogues, they seem pale compared to what he experienced with you. This isn't just memory, it's a constant comparison. And this comparison always places you in a different position, more intense, more charged with meaning. Have you ever met someone who, without even trying, becomes a benchmark for all other interactions? If so, comment. I've experienced that. Slowly he begins to talk about you without saying your name. He mentions that conversation as if it were a significant event, but never reveals all the details. Maybe for protection, maybe because he knows no one would understand the weight it carries for him. It's like a secret shared only with his own memory. This secret, however, is not light. He feels he is carrying something that in some way needs to be resolved, but at the same time, he fears that resolving it means losing the enigma, losing the intensity, losing the invisible presence that has accompanied him since that day. That's why he keeps everything suspended, neither moving forward to clarify nor retreating to forget. He stays in the middle, where silence still breathes, where the past and present touch, where your image is both memory and imagination. And it's in this space that he lives now, not in the world around him, but in the world that conversation created inside him. A place where every detail still throbs, every nuance still echoes, every possibility is still open, waiting to be deciphered. At first it seemed that the conversation lived in isolation within his memory, a fragment stored away, visited only when he allowed it. But over time, he realizes it's not like that. The dialogue begins to cross boundaries, appearing in places it shouldn't be. Suddenly he changes his route to work, not because he needs to, but because that path avoids passing the place where you saw each other. Or, conversely, he chooses to go right by there, as if physical proximity could reignite the original feeling. Every route, every choice now carries an indirect relation to that moment. He starts saying no to invitations he would normally accept, or he says yes to commitments he would usually avoid. Decisions cease to be purely rational. They pass through an invisible filter that asks, does this bring me closer or push me away from that feeling? And the answer determines what he does. Even the way he dresses changes. He chooses clothes that remind him of the day you met, or he avoids colors he wore on that occasion, as if doing so could prevent the memory from surfacing with such intensity. These are small choices, almost imperceptible, but constant, and his perception of the world also shifts. Other people's conversations take on new meaning. He pays attention to how people look, pause, breathe. Everything is compared to what he experienced with you. The world is now measured by the standard of that interaction. He notices he's more selective about what he listens to and whom he speaks with. He has no patience for superficial dialogues. If the conversation doesn't carry weight, if there's nothing hidden to decipher, he disconnects. Because after experiencing something so profound, everything else feels shallow. Have you ever experienced such a profound moment that everything else felt dull in comparison? If so, comment, "I've felt that." And although he won't admit it to everyone, he's realized that this obsession starts to shape even the bigger decisions he makes. A project he decides to postpone because it somehow reminds him of you. A place he chooses to visit because it evokes the same vibe as your meeting. These actions on the surface seem random, but there's an invisible line connecting everything back to that last conversation. This line is not just emotional, it feels almost physical. He feels it in his body when something brings him closer to or further away from what he experienced. It's a sort of internal compass that always points to the same north, the moment your words penetrated him. What's even more unsettling is that he doesn't try to break this pattern. Deep down, there's a quiet pleasure in allowing the memory to influence his choices. It's as if by keeping the impact of that conversation alive, he's also keeping a part of himself awake that may have been dormant. The day goes on. People come and go, life continues. But for him, everything is filtered through a before and after that moment. And as much as he knows this isn't healthy, he also knows he doesn't truly want to return to the state he was in before hearing you. Because in a way, that conversation awakened him. And even if the awakening is painful, he prefers the pain of being aware to the numbness of before. He begins to realize that the conversation no longer exists, only during his waking hours. It crosses into his sleep. In dreams, you don't appear as you were, but as he wishes you had been, sometimes closer, sometimes farther away, but always with that same gaze he can't decipher when he's awake. The scenes change. An unfamiliar street, a quiet cafe, an old house he doesn't even know exists. But the essence is always the same, the two of you, and a conversation that never quite reaches its conclusion. When he wakes up, it takes him a few seconds to realize where he is. His body still carries the sensations of the dream, as if it had really happened, and for a few moments he can't separate what was memory from what was invention. This confusion makes him think about time. If the past can blend with the present like this, maybe there is never a definitive separation. Perhaps certain conversations continue to happen within us long after they've ended in the physical world. And in his case, that conversation hasn't ended. It has simply moved to a different place. He already knows that even though new experiences come along, this moment will remain there, intact. Not as a dead weight, but like a seed that sprouts on its own, producing new interpretations with each season. And in silence, he accepts that he may never find all the answers. But he also realizes something bigger. Sometimes it's not the content of the conversation that matters, but what it reveals about the one listening. And in his case, that revelation was too deep to forget. He doesn't know if he will ever tell you all of this. Maybe he will never say it. Perhaps he prefers to keep it, guarding the mystery as if it were a vital part of who he is now. But if he ever does speak up, you will understand why a single conversation was able to change so much. Because for him, it wasn't just a dialogue, it was a turning point. And once someone realizes that, there's no going back. If this text touched you, the next one will turn you inside out. Click here and continue with me.